Well, hundreds of thousands of anti-regime protesters have rallied across Yemen. They're demanding the quick ouster of Ali Abdullah Saleh's regime.
Well, they've chanted slogans against Israel and the U.S., slamming Washington for its alleged support of the Yemeni regime. The protesters also chanted slogans against Saudi Arabia for what they called interfering in Yemeni affairs. They've criticized Saudi Arabia's proposals for a gradual power transfer in Yemen. Saudi Arabia, backed by the U.S., has proposed that Saleh steps down within 30 days and for a national unity government to run the country until elections are held. Now, the protesters say such transition plans would only prolong Yemen's political crisis. Meanwhile, the regime forces have shelled opposition tribesmen positions around the southern city of Taiz. At least 3 tribesmen have been killed and several more have become wounded. I'm going to discuss this a little bit further with Jason Ditz. He is the managing news editor with antiwar.com. He's joining me via Skype from Saginaw in Michigan. Thank you very much, Jason Ditz, for joining our broadcast. Isn't Saleh's treatment in Saudi Arabia getting a bit too long? I mean, media lack of proper access to him. Is this to buy time for his government? And if you think so, what purpose does it exactly serve?
Well, it's not really clear if it's too long or not. We really don't know the extent of his injuries. The initial Yemeni government reports were that his injuries were extremely mild, but now the sound of it is that they were quite severe. There were even talks at one point that he might have already died of his injuries, but that doesn't appear to have been the case. I don't really know what they stand to gain by delaying giving him over to the media for access, but it does seem like it's not just a front. It's a very legitimate injury that he sustained.
Right. Jason, these days, in most rallies, the protesters chant slogans against the U.S., Saudi Arabia, and Israel. What do you think is behind people's anger at the 3?
Well, I think it's mostly reflective of the same thing, that President Saleh's multi-decade rule wouldn't have been possible without the acquiescence, particularly of Saudi Arabia and the United States, but also Israel, and that there is a sense that the change that's eventually going to happen from these protests is being slowed down primarily by the United States and Saudi Arabia, who are trying to orchestrate some sort of orderly transition of power to another convenient ruler.
Right. Some 60 opposition leaders in Yemen are wanted by the government on charges of attacking the Republican Guard. Interestingly, there are also officers arrested for betraying Ali Abdullah Saleh. What do you think is the government's policy towards people at this point?
I think right now it's not a formal policy so much as just a piecemeal attempt to survive as long as possible. And it doesn't seem to be working. Of course, there's been a lot of speculation about the loss of some of their southern territories, whether or not that was deliberate. But it seems like, deliberate or no, their inability to retake those territories speaks volumes about just how weak this government has gotten and just how far they have before they have any hope of being a realistic government going forward.
When discussing the issues relating to Yemen with Mr. Jason Ditz, managing news editor with antiwar.com, as you can see live from Saginaw in Michigan. Thank you.